Good morning, Bridget.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. I was thinking about our last conversation and the story you told about your daughter asking why your dad's car was louder than yours. It's such a perfect example of how kids notice the world around them. Did she ever follow up with more questions after that?
Yeah, she's had a lot more questions. Now she will, point out which cars she thinks are electric on the road. She'll also like ask my parents when they're going to get an electric car. She's very curious about, I think, like why some people have electric cars and why some people have gas cars and how that's kind of like changing as, even over her awareness, she's clearly noticed a lot more on the roads here where we live.
Interesting. Those small moments say so much about curiosity and awareness. Can't wait to explore that more today. So let's dive in. The following is a conversation with Bridget Shirvell, an award winning journalist, sustainability advocate, and author of Parenting in Climate Crisis. Bridget has dedicated years of researching and reporting on how families can handle the emotional and practical challenges of parenting during the climate crisis. This is Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Bensalah. Today we'll explore what it takes to nurture and guide climate-strong kids, sharing real stories and practical insights that help parents turn fear into action. Bridget, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
What was the moment that inspired you to write Parenting in a Climate Crisis?
I think, it was really the birth of my own child. She's 6.5, she'll be 7 in October. And I had long been a writer focused on food systems. So I was already kind of like involved in environmental aspects and climate change. But, I think like once you have a child of your own, right, everything sort of like changes. You have skin in the game, as a friend of mine recently said. And I kind of realized I was like, oh, like, how do I do this? Like, I know the climate crisis is going to be probably the biggest issue that's facing that generation. Like, what does it mean to raise a child who will be able to thrive in whatever like situation we find ourselves in the future? And when I was looking around, I just like I didn't really find much information. There was a ton out there on like how you talk to your kid about the climate crisis, but there wasn't that much about, right, how do you live on a day-to-day basis? That's kind of really what I wanted. And so in a lot of ways I kind of wrote the book for myself because I was in a position as a journalist where I was having lots of conversations with, farmers, and even fashion designers who were already kind of in the sustainability space. So it was kind of just a natural thing to go, okay, well, what do you do in your own house? Like, what types of food do you eat? What type of car do you drive? What skills do you think your kids are going to need? And that really became the basis for the book.
How has your experience in food system journalism influenced your parenting approach?
I mean, I wish it could say that I could say that my child is like a very adventurous eater, but she's not. Um, so in that sense, maybe it should have done more. But
Mhm.
I think being a journalist and being involved in food systems reporting has made me curious about the world. And I think that's a skill that I try to nurture as much as possible in my own child, not just like about food, but just the world in general. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
And did that background give you a different perspective on climate urgency?
I think so because I was already having these conversations with, farmers who are worried about what they were growing and chefs who were worried about their ability to source ingredients that they loved. I think one reporting that kind of stood out to me was I interviewed these two coffee store owners several years ago, and it was really just like a profile story on the fact that they were opening up this new business. But one of the things that they talked about was the type of coffee that they really liked, the single source coffee that they really, really loved from
Hmm.
Ecuador, and how they were worried about potentially not being able to get it anymore as the climate grew warmer. And so that was kind of one of those like eye-opening things where I was like, oh, this is really going to affect like what we do on a day-to-day basis, not just the like disaster storms, right? I think that people react in some ways their best selves when some sort of disaster happens. You see communities really pulling together, but I'm a little more fascinated on like the day-to-day changes, the things that we kind of don't notice are happening but are clearly going to make an impact.
Yeah. And Bridget, when you interact and talk with parents, what fear do they most often mention to you regarding climate change?
I think that people just really don't know what to do. I think
Hmm.
that it's interesting over the course of really like the 5 years it took me to put out this book. It's interesting to see how much it has changed from people in my like professional life who are already very involved in climate actions to it being more that people at my kids' school will now be like, oh, I know that you do this. Like, what
Hmm.
type of laundry detergent should I buy? Like, what is the best thing to do?
Yeah.
It's just interesting how much that has shifted to me, that where people are talking about it more. But I think what I hear from them is that they're so overwhelmed by it, they don't know what they can do, but that they
Yeah.
want to do something. That's what I hear the most.
And the root cause is a lack of awareness or too much information at once that we don't know what's important and what's not?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that, for me, there are days where I feel like, oh, if people were really aware of just how bad it could get, like, how could you focus on anything else,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times people here in the US where I am, think it's still this thing that's going to happen in the future instead of really making that connection that it's already happening now. Like we've had a hotter than normal summer. We've also had very little rain here. We had very little rain last year. Those are all climate effects.
Hmm.
And I think we're not really aware that it already is happening, but also of how bad it's going to get. But then I think on the flip side of that, there is so much almost doomsday information that people feel so overwhelmed that there is nothing that they can do. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that we also, within climate circles, there's been this push in recent years to really focus on like systematic change. And that is definitely important. But I think it has kind of left individuals feeling like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do too.
Hmm.
Versus like, I think there's a lot that individuals can do.
Yeah. Do you find those fears are more about the future or the present?
I think it really depends. Right now there are a lot of wildfires burning in Canada and
Yeah.
the smoke's drifting down to us. So last week the air quality was really bad here where I am. And so I think when something like that happens, people's fears are more present tense, like,
Hmm.
oh, can I take the kids outside? Like, can I exercise? Can I do this? But I think it does very quickly go away to being like, oh, this is something we're going to have to worry about in the future once those like immediate threats aren't there.
Yeah. You're talking about parents feeling overwhelmed. What's the first mental shift they should make?
I have found that the first real mental shift, and this actually is something I found when I was doing research for the book that I don't really like. It took me a long time to like this advice. And
Right.
that's that you really have to talk to other people about it. And
Hmm.
I'm more of an introvert. So that was something that I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to talk about it. I don't know if I want to be like that person on the playground or at the school pickup who's always like going on and on about climate change, right? Like that's not necessarily the like fun gonna invite that person to a dinner party person to
Hmm.
be. Um, but what I have found is that when you do like talk about it, and it can be very simple, it can be like, oh, I have been trying to eat less meat. Do you have any like good dinner ideas? And then you can kind of talk about like why you're eating less
Right.
meat from a climate perspective. But I have found that the more I talk about it, the more connected I feel to people in my own community, the more I realize that other people are having the same like fears and conversations, but also that I feel like I am less alone. And so I feel like that is a big mental shift that parents and really anybody can make. Really, it's just to like talk about it more with your friends and neighbors and like how you're feeling.
Yeah, yeah, interesting, interesting. I mean, we're talking about in one hand, and it's not only in the U.S. It's even here in Europe. These kind of issues, quite often you feel overwhelmed from parenting standpoint to day-to-day stuff we do. How can you help parents avoid perfectionism when it comes to sustainability?
So, I hope that the book gets across this to people. And it's something that I've tried to stress is that I really focus about like where I am in this particular point in my life, right? Like I've had two friends who recently had children and they were both asking about, if they should use cloth diapers, should they use reusable diapers? And I kind of was like, just do whatever is not going to make you crazy. Like from a sustainability point of view, like your kid's going to be in diapers for 2 years. Like it's not that big of a difference. And also you
Yeah.
have to think about like if you're someplace where there's a drought, probably disposable diapers are your best like option because you don't want to be
Hmm.
washing them all the time. But also just, like when I had my kid, I was living in an apartment building and I didn't have laundry. So I used disposable diapers because it just wasn't feasible to use cloth diapers.
Yeah.
And I like to think a lot about do the best you can for the place you are in the like season of life that you are in and then like adjust it as you can. When my child was probably like 3 to 4, I guess it was, my sister moved to Texas. So she was far away from us in New York. And up until that point, we had lived within a few miles of her. So my kids saw her once a week. So that was a big change.
Yeah.
And as a sustainability person, I know how bad flying is, but my like sister was living thousands of miles away from me, so we got on the plane to go visit her as much as we could. That relationship was important to me. Now my sister is back living within driving distance. She's 3 hours away, and I have made a commitment now where we try to only fly once every other year. That's kind of my like way of shifting it to use less. But that was just a like this is where I am in my life right now. Um, and then the other thing that I think, people who pick up the book is like pick something that you feel like you can do. Pick something that you're passionate about to start with. I come at a lot of sustainability from a food perspective. So I
Hmm.
pay attention to the types of food we eat, the food that we're wasting. But, if you're somebody who is super into fashion, you could think about it of like, well, how can I reuse certain fashion items or how can I buy fashion that has less plastic in it. There's all different things to focus on depending on like what your passions are.
Why it is important to follow a child's lead in climate conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially the older your kid gets, it's really important because I think a lot of young people have such great ideas of
Hmm.
like solutions or things that they're interested in. But even from a young age, I think sometimes we get hung up on this idea that we have to have a like big, formal, serious sit down conversation about the climate crisis and then we're done with it. And I
Hmm.
mean, if that works for you, you can do it, but I really don't think that's what you need to do. I think it can be building the pieces, right? Like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
my kid noticing that our car was quieter than her grandfather's car when she was in it. So that was a very like easy conversation where I explained the difference and then also explained that we have an electric car because it's better for the environment and for the air. And people are going to make that shift where more and more people are going to have electric cars. And you kind of just like can build off of that, right? Like, what
Hmm.
is electric energy? We also have solar panels on our house, so it's easy for me to be like, let's go outside and like look up at the roof and you can see these things and they're collecting energy from the sun to turn on the lights. But it's very much just like letting your kid ask questions and being able to take the time to like answer them in a way that you can kind of put the environment in there without it feeling like you're constantly pushing it.
Yeah. And how do curiosity and adaptability protect against climate burnout?
Yeah, I think the more curious, our kids are, or the more curious we are, the more kind of open you are both to hearing other perspectives, but also just to falling in love with the world around us. And that kind of
Mhm.
like makes you want to protect it. And I think that curiosity plays right into like adaptability, right? If you're curious about how something works, you're also probably more likely to be able to adapt to figuring out different things.
We talked about parents completely overwhelmed by the issue of climate change. What's the best way to start a conversation with kids and be honest
And be honest,
about
yeah.
the main issue?
I mean, I think you really want to pick something that they can kind of see or experience, especially like the younger they are. So here where we live, we've had a very, very hot summer.
Mm.
We've had a lot of heat waves. And so I have used that as an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about, well, what is a heat wave and why has it been so hot? Like, why are these happening? And then I also really always focus on like the things that we can do and the things that other people, right? Like to stress the fact that people all around the world are like working to make this better and trying to find solutions because I think that hope is really important, especially for kids.
Yeah. And Bridget, with your daughter, when you ask this kind of question or when she asks you, are there some, let's say, unexpected climate related questions or?
Um, I think it's one of those things where you do track where like I am always surprised by what she picks up on and what she doesn't, right? Like she understands that public transportation, for instance, is like
Mhm.
better for the planet than like us being in our own cars, for instance. But she also recently was like, oh, but that means airplanes are good because there's lots of people on an airplane. And so sometimes I have to take a step back and be like, oh, like, not really. And here's why, and kind of clarify those things. So it's always surprising to me what she picks up on and what she doesn't. And also just, like I've been doing this with her entire life and she's 7 or going to be 7 now. And they really do listen and kind of pick up on things. During Earth Day last year at school, her teacher, it wasn't like part of an Earth Day celebration. They were just doing a segment on patterns. And so she gave them all like plastic necklaces with beads and had them like
Mhm.
create their own pattern. And so my daughter like asked her, she was like, well, plastic's not very good for the planet. Is there something else we could use? Right. And
Right.
like that was something that really surprised me. One that she would even like remember that and notice that, but
Yeah.
also just that like she felt comfortable enough asking her teacher. So I think that our kids really are like listening and picking up on things.
Yeah. Any advice to parents on the best way to approach these climate topics with frustrated or angry teenagers?
I think you kind of have to let them be angry. I mean, I think they have the right to be angry with all of us, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
angry with us that we haven't made this better yet. And I think that they're in a scary place, especially as a teenager, where they're really starting to think about what their future holds. And they're probably thinking about that from like a climate point of view too, right? Just like thinking about going to college or thinking about what type of jobs they want. And then they're probably thinking about, oh, well, like what types of jobs are going to be possible or where am I going to live? So I think it's important to let them be angry. But I also think, you can kind of be honest and say, hey, like, I'm angry too that we haven't like fixed that we haven't done a better job. And kind of like ask them like what's something that you think that we could do in our own house to make this better and let them really take the lead on that. I think it's important to be honest, and not say, oh, everything's going to be okay, because that's not something that we know, but to kind of say, I'm here to help you figure this out, and we can do
Hmm.
this together.
Yeah. Let's shift gear and talk about the support systems, mainly schools and sports and community. What role do schools play in preparing climate aware citizens?
I think that schools have the ability to play a huge role. I'm not sure how much they are yet,
Hmm.
right? I mean, once your kid is in like school full time, they're away from you for 8 hours in a day. That said, here in the US, climate change is a very controversial political topic. And
Yeah.
so different states have different rules about what climate teachings they will do and what they will not. But I think that there's a lot of like little ways for schools to do it. We haven't done it here in my school system yet, but I'm hoping that
Hmm.
we will this year where they have a fall festival in September. And I was talking to another parent and I was like, oh, that would be a perfect time to do like a Halloween costume swap, right? And that like
Yeah.
immediately like reduces waste, also kind of helps to build community, teaches our kids a little bit about like reusing things. So that is kind of like a sneaky way to do it
Hmm.
because it's like climate change, but it also just feels like, oh, like we're already having this fall festival. Let's like swap Halloween costumes and make it easier for people to have a fun Halloween.
Yeah.
Um,
Talking with parents, have they ever discussed if these climate issues or topics are included within the school curriculum, or it depends based on each school, each class, each
so
teacher?
yeah, it tends to be based on each school system. Here in Connecticut, where I am, schools are supposed to have a climate change curriculum now.
Hmm.
I mean, again, my kid is very young. She's just gone through kindergarten, so she's just had 1 year of it. I didn't really notice much. I know at the high school level in my town, the students seem like they have really pushed for it themselves. They've started their own sustainability club and they've been working with the facilities director to get solar panels installed with the hopes that those solar panels would also become part of kind of like the learning curriculum. They'd be able to like look at how much energy they're producing. But I think it's very like driven individually and sometimes even by the students themselves.
The sports business in the US, it's part of the day-to-day life, and especially in the
Mhm.
weekends, or it depends which sport. Have you seen some sport teams or organizations or right holders talking about the climate crisis, or taking some actions?
I think that more recently it has become an issue again just because of the air quality and that
Hmm.
wildfire smoke. Like my own kid has had like soccer practice moved indoors just because they felt like the air quality wasn't good enough to be outside. And I think that is a conversation that more and more places are having around youth sports of like paying attention to the weather and being able to just know how the climate is already affecting our kids' sports practices. I also have seen, some places experiment with like clover fields instead of like regular grass with the idea that they're a little more durable and you don't have to mow them as much.
Hmm.
I haven't seen that be very like widespread yet, but I think that is something that people are starting to think about. I also think, again, going back to like reusing things, you see it from like a team uniform point of view, right? Like some soccer teams here will like collect like the jerseys at the end of the year so that they can wash them and redistribute them to the kids next year instead of like making everybody buy a new one each year, which like again is can be like a climate action.
Why has sustainability messaging become so confusing for families?
I think it's because there's no real definition of what sustainability is, at least like
Hmm.
no agreed upon definition. So it kind of opens the door for there to be a lot of greenwashing and kind of just a lot of people trying to sell you things with the idea that it's sustainable.
Yeah. Do you believe sustainability should be rebranded, or it's time to rebrand?
I don't know. I'm not sure how we would even like really rebrand that, I guess.
Because it's still confusing, complicated. Quite often when we say complicated, meaning expensive, you know,
Mhm.
meaning we need to invest more and things like that. And the main reason because it's been politicized over and over and over.
Right.
You know, And when you look at COP, the United Nations annual conference that moves in different part of the world every year, and I think the duration of COP is 2 weeks, I think, and
Yeah, about.
it's always the last day that, and the media, of course, they fluff a little bit, you know. It's always the last day where there is this kind of controversy where the conference, the host, they're trying to push everyone to sign some kind of a deal or an agreement. You remember the famous Paris COP in 2015, where everyone, let's say the majority of countries, pledged to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So, and I think it doesn't matter if you believe climate change is a hoax or it's a reality. At the end of the day, when we say what's the root cause, then you have people that believe the root cause is the human activity, and you have other folks that believe climate change has been changing forever, since the inception of planet Earth. And what everyone, I believe 99% champion, is to have a clean air, clean water, and clean soil from where our food comes from.
Right.
So, and for this reason, I think it's time to rebrand sustainability to something different.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it seems like you could get more people to kind of rally around that idea, right, of clean air, clean water, clean soil.
yeah.
Of course, like sometimes how we get there is where we get a little stuck.
Hmm.
I mean, I am at the point now where don't, I think COP is kind of silly. The fact that we're still doing it. I'm like, well, we haven't, I don't know, we're still arguing about things that I think we should have figured out by now. In terms of just like lowering emissions, even I think now is really the time to start thinking about like preparing for what's going to happen. Like, how are we going to feed people? Like, where are people going to live? How many like climate refugees are countries going to take in? Like, that's what the focus should be now. And we're still very behind. So I think of COP as kind of a vanity exercise, not just for governments, but also for corporations and just like the individuals in a way that go there. I don't really pay that much attention to it.
Yeah, yeah. That conference is becoming completely obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
It's just another conference, another show. But when you think about the outcome, what's next? It's completely obsolete, and it's a shame because there is so much to be done without spending a huge amount of money. There is
Mm-hmm.
so much in terms of boosting the awareness about raising temperatures globally. What can we do? What kind of breakthroughs, innovation, technology to implement, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's funny you're talking about, we spoke earlier about electric cars. Here in Scandinavia and mainly in Norway, Norway was and still the number one country where, if I'm not mistaken, 95% of all cars are EV vehicles, electric vehicles. But what Norway did prior giving some kind of incentive to community, to buyers to purchase electric cars, they invested heavily into the infrastructure, charging
Mm-hmm.
stations, repair shops, etc., etc. And then it went viral. Europe, the adaptation was slow, and even the government incentive didn't help to boost the electric vehicle purchase. And then we started to talk about the cost, depreciation, the value of the electric car, the maintenance, the batteries, the manufacturing process. From an emission standpoint, yes, there is a huge difference, but from supply chain, from manufacturing, and when it comes to recycling and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
there is a big questions to be discussed openly about, is it really sustainable? You know?
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah. And
and
I mean,
it's
I'd say that's something that I had talked about with my kid because like when she asks, oh, well, why don't more people have electric cars? I have said, well, the best possible thing to do is to keep the car that you have for as long as possible, whether that is an EV or a gas powered car, right? You don't want to be buying a new car every 3 years. We were in a place where like I had a lease that was up, and so it made more sense for me to buy an EV car. But if I have friends who, have a 10-year-old car, and I'm like, well, keep that car until you can no longer drive it.
yeah. Let's talk about the your book and the writing process. Actually, what was the most challenging part
Um,
of writing parenting in climate crisis?
so the most challenging part was actually writing the book proposal because most nonfiction books are sold on book proposals instead of on the manuscript.
Hmm.
And the book proposal is basically like what you would think of like a business marketing plan if you were to open a new business and wanted like a
Hmm.
bank to finance you. And that just is not my skill set. So that took like a lot of time and a lot of kind of like thinking about, okay, how am I going to word this or who is right? Like my audience for the book proposal is a publisher versus like my audience for the book was parents and people thinking about becoming parents or grandparents, like anybody with a kid in their life. So that was
Yeah.
very different. Um, I will say, like, in terms of actually writing the book, probably the hardest part was just like how like information changes, right? And how to
Mm.
make the book like useful based on like what the future is going to hold and what governments and countries are going to do. I think when I started writing the book, we hadn't hit that 1.5 degrees of global warming, and last year we did. So
Hmm.
that was kind of like a conversation last year of, do I need to update this anywhere in the book? And we kind of decided that it didn't necessarily make sense because I laid out different climate scenarios in the book based on like what temperatures we hit, but I didn't necessarily like say, oh, we're going to keep it to 1.5. And then we didn't. But that was kind of like one of the trickier things of being just like, how does this book stay relevant?
Did you had the preferred timing to write, to research, or
Um, so I mean, with a young kid and as like a single mom, I kind of like write whenever
it's
I can,
challenging?
right?
Yeah, yeah.
When I can do it, I would try to get up earlier just because I'm a morning person and kind of write
Hmm.
for like an hour or so or research for an hour or so before she was up. But then sometimes she'd surprise me and be wandering downstairs at 5 a.m. and I'd be like, no, you're supposed to be sleeping right now.
Sounds
Yeah.
familiar. Yeah, yeah. The book combines personal stories with interviews from scientists, psychologists, and other parents. How did you choose which voices and examples to include in final manuscript?
Um, so a lot of them were people that I had like interviewed for other stories I was working on and kind of was like, oh, I
Hmm.
really connected with you and what you were saying, and just kind of wanted to include that. It was also really important to me that I tried to have as many different types of voices as possible. So, there's climate scientists who are also parents in there. There's a professor who is also an aunt in there. There's single parents and your typical heterosexual like family with 2.5 kids, just a lot of people from different diverse backgrounds was
Hmm.
important to me to kind of see how different people were handling that.
Yeah. And the editing process, was it straightforward or complicated?
It was pretty straightforward. That I was part of that was one of the parts I think I found the most fun actually, to kind of be able to like play a little bit with like language and, oh, like, is this going to be the most impactful sentence? And also it was just really nice, right, to have somebody who was like fact checking things in a way or
Yeah.
be like, oh, this doesn't really make sense to me, especially like for someone like me who's been so enmeshed in this world for so long, to have like
Hmm.
somebody who isn't as much to be like, okay, what does that actually like mean? Was really important.
Hmm. Was there a story or a quote you loved but you had to cut or streamline?
Um, yeah, so there's a whole chapter on animals, right? And talking
Hmm.
about like household pets and, how they can help inspire kids to have a love of nature and protect the earth. And that chapter remains, but we cut out probably like a quarter of it that was more about how to deal with a pet dying when your kids are young.
Hmm.
And that had some quotes from a climatologist who is a professor at the University of Arizona. And we had also had a dog that passed away when my child was 3. So I included like my personal stories from that. And that was something that kind of like makes me sad that we didn't include, especially because over the past couple of years, I've had a lot of friends who have like lost pets with young kids. And so people like ask me, oh, well, like, how did you like handle that? Because really, for so many kids, the loss of a pet is really their first experience with death.
Indeed. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I strongly advise you the day you have time, just write second book and focus on that. Yeah, it's yeah. We had some experiences with pets that passed away, and little ones didn't. Basically, it was hard for them to, was hard for us as a parents to explain.
Oh, yeah.
You
And I
know,
mean,
and
they don't really understand like the permanency of it when they're really young. Like, I think they don't really develop that skill set till they're 5 or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The reviews highlight your accessible, engaging writing style rooted in your journalism background. How did you manage to make the book emotionally compelling without overwhelming readers with heavy climate issues?
I think I just really focused on the things that I was feeling. I also hand wrote a lot of the book, right? So I was like, okay, I know what this chapter is going to be about, but I'm going to close
Hmm.
my computer and just like write, and then like fill in the things I need to afterwards. And I think that was really helpful. Someone who read the book told me, she was like, oh, I can tell that AI didn't write this book because there's so much soul in it. And that I felt like was one of the best compliments.
Yeah, yeah. Making it not complicated, basically, with all the research, all the scientific data, and the research that you went through. Talking about the structure of the book
Uh,
based on. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah. So I spent a lot of time thinking about the structure of the book. In fact, I printed out my like chapter descriptions and laid them out on the floor of my local coffee shop and rearranged them a couple of times because somebody gave me the advice that I needed to like step into my book. So I will
Yeah.
say the like structure was something that I paid a lot of attention to and was a little worried about because it does start off, the chapters it starts off with are like how you talk to your kids about the climate crisis and how you handle emotions, which are kind of like more of the like hardcore kind of like doomsday chapters in a way. And so I was kind of like, oh, I don't like, is this bad? Should we start with hope? But I think it ended up like doing what it was supposed to do because then it kind of builds into like how you can help like nurture and inspire a love of nature and like raising an environmental steward, and then goes into things that like individuals can do,
Hmm.
and then goes into more like systematic change. So it does kind of like each chapter builds on each other, but it is also kind of designed that, if you're getting a dog for your family, like you could just read the chapter on animals to start with, and then you could go back to something else later.
Hmm. If you have to do it again, write again a book, what would you do differently, Bridget?
So, I have been working a bit on a novel. So I guess I'm
Hmm.
doing something different where I get to make up things instead of having to do lots of research.
Yeah.
So that is something that I'm doing differently. I don't know how much I would do differently about like the writing process. I think that if anything, you don't know what you don't know. And I hadn't like kind of experienced the publicity part of it afterwards or like the marketing plan. I think I would be a little more organized around that.
Mm. And on that, when you write a novel or you are in process of writing a novel, Is it easy to find the start and the finish, or the finish first and then you start the book?
Um, yeah, so where I am now is like I have done the start and I've done the ending for the most part, but I'm kind of stuck in the messy like middle, right? Like how I get to the characters to that
Yeah.
point while still making it interesting for the reader. That's kind of where I am now. Actually, it's funny that we're talking today because Wednesdays are my day where in the afternoon I meet up with another writer. He's working
Hmm.
on a hiking memoir, but we kind of like touch base about our like pain points and then we sit in a coffee shop and write together for like 2 hours. And that's been really helpful because I have that accountability. Although he's a teacher, so I think I only have like 2 weeks left of like having him here before it will be back in the classroom and won't have his summer off.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing. What does a climate prepared household look like in 2030?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I hope a climate prepared household is running on renewable energy. I also think people need to have some sort of like safety go bag, right? So that if there is a wildfire, if there is a flood, like you know where all your important
Hmm.
documents are and you can leave. I mean, I realize that that's a little scary, but I think that is the reality that we have seen time and time again. Um, and I think that you have talked to your kids about what they do in a natural disaster so that they like know, where the meeting point is, where they should go. They feel safe about all of that. Um, and then I think it is hopefully it's a joyful household. I have focused a lot over the past year on really like building up my local community because I think that's how we get through this. So I, have friends who will just drop over for a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or just like so the kids can play in the backyard. I really hope that more of that continues.
Bridget, what gives you the most hope for your daughter or the next generation?
I think it's really watching them, right? Like yesterday, I took my daughter after work to this like local dock and she was jumping off the dock with her friend and just like watching the two of them do that, watching them be like, oh, there's a cone jelly, there's a moon jelly. Just like having them be able to have that time like outside and really appreciate it. That's something that gives me a lot of hope. And I think that, I work with some high school students on an eco
Hmm.
fair that happens in my town every year and really seeing how engaged they are and how much they want to move this forward and mitigate as much of it as they can gives me a lot of hope. And I think that as adults, it's kind of our job to help support that in whatever way we can.
You're listening to the Pre-Zero Sports Talk. For more conversations on sports leadership, faith, performance, and innovation from Sweden to the world, visit prezerosportstalk.com. Now it's time for our lightning round.
Okay.
Ready for speedy Q&A?
I hope so.
Let's do this. A book that's changed your perspective.
So I love this is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Lewis Dufran, which was just the book is so poetic and inventive and just made me really think about what writing could be.
Mhm. Coffee, tea, or something different?
Coffee.
Coffee. Something your daughter taught you about resilience.
um, as I had mentioned, we lost a dog who died when she
Hmm.
was really young, when she was about 3, and kind of watching her handle that, I think taught me a lot about resilience.
Wow. Your favorite way to recharge after a long day or a long week?
Right now, I would say it is jumping off the dock to swim.
Yeah, fantastic. A sustainable product you genuinely love.
um,
Or I will say eco-friendly. I don't want to use the word
Eco-friendly.
sustainability.
So my daughter has a stainless steel lunchbox that
Hmm.
I absolutely love because it can go in the dishwasher, which is a huge plus for me. And also, she's had it now for 3 years. It is hopefully will be indestructible. When I bought it, the review had the person who had reviewed it had said that her kids had this from kindergarten through high school. So I'm hoping that that is true. But yeah, we take that thing like everywhere, even just days at the beach or snacks at the park.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it will last a lifetime. Trust me, Stacy. Yeah. Your go-to comfort meal.
My go-to comfort meal,
Yeah.
I guess, and this is not very eco-friendly of me, but my mom makes this pasta with sausage and chicken, and that is probably my go-to comfort meal.
Great. A writer or activist who inspires you?
I would say the activists that inspire me right now are really the kids at the Stonington High School Sustainability Club, just like watching what they've been able to accomplish over the past couple of years. To think about getting solar panels on the school, to think about composting, they've been really inspiring to me.
Hmm. If you had a climate billboard, what would it say?
Ooh, what would it say? I think I would say fight for fireflies.
Something people misunderstand about you.
Oh, I think sometimes people take being quiet for not necessarily being engaged when I like to think things through.
If you could have a dinner with a historical figure, who will it be and why?
Oh, I feel like I should pick some sort of climate person, but as a young kid, I was always fascinated by Woodrow Wilson and just the establishment of what would later become the UN. So that's probably who I would pick.
Mm-hmm. A place you hope your daughter visits one day.
I hope that I will take her to Cape Hatteras, which is the beach that I grew up going to as a kid, and is slowly disappearing.
Mm-hmm. Your guilty pleasure TV show.
Huh. Let's see. Well, I don't know if this is really like a guilty pleasure. I really haven't been watching that much TV this summer, but my brother got me into Shrinking, which is like a psychologist-based show. But it's been really fun to watch.
Fantastic. And lastly, a piece of advice to our listeners on any topic.
I think I would say just pick something to start with if you're feeling overwhelmed about the climate crisis. Don't worry about it being perfect. Just pick one thing that you can do.
Great. Bridget Shirvell, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And before we wrap up, could you share with our listeners the best way to connect with you, learn more about your work, or follow your journey online?
Of course. So my website, Bree, Shirvell, SHIRVELL.com, sort of is where I put new writings that I'm doing. It has information about the book and how you can subscribe to my newsletter.
And of course, your book is on Amazon.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And to our listeners, I'd like to leave you with a few words from Jane Goodall, known for her groundbreaking work in conservation and her lifelong dedication to environmental stewardship. She once said, "What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." We want to thank you for joining our show. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more for you. You can now watch the entire episode on our YouTube and Spotify channels. While you're here, subscribe and don't forget to tap the bell. Visit prezerosportstalk.com to explore more conversations on sports, leadership, faith, performance, and innovation. From Sweden to the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and make a difference. We'll see you soon. Take care.